Good morning to all of you out there. I'm Cito Beltran, and welcome to the program Agenda. It's July 23, 2020, and it's a Thursday. You're watching us via Signal TV channels 8 and 250, as well as the Facebook platform and YouTube on YouTube from One News PH. And kung inabutan nyo kung nakangiti, parang ngumingisi, may nabasa lang kasi ako sa sa front page ng Philippine Star study, speaking, breathing, widespread COVID. So, delikado yung mga ganyang storya kasi baka may makabasa at sabi nga, sige, sunod na order natin, wag na nating pahingahin at wag na nating pagsalitain yung para hindi kumalat ang COVID-19. Just throwing in a bit of humor, right? Humor there because we all need to find reason to laugh even at COVID-19, although we need to take it seriously, just kind of humor ourselves. But it's getting serious. The president already ordered the PNP to go out and arrest people who don't wear masks, although it's another not really rib-tickling, but also equally humorous situation, whereas the president is saying, hulihin lahat ng mga hindi nagmamask, and then lalabas itong study na ang mga Pilipino, number 2 na mga sumusunod, second most compliant on wearing mask. And I remember about a month ago when the government or IATF people said pasaway ang Pilipino, we go around, we just drive anywhere we want, and turns out that Google did a study, algorithms, and they figured out that of all the countries, considering we are on the longest lockdown, the general population stayed home. Binabantayan nila yung ating mga cellphone, chinecheck nila, and nakita nila that most Filipinos have actually stayed home. So it just tells us that the problem is not really about pasaway. The problem is we are congested in Metro Manila, in Cebu. The urban locations are so congested na hindi talaga maiwasan yung magkahawahan. So at the end of the day, nasa atin pa rin yung yung desisyon, yung choice, and yung action if we are going to just socially distance, wear a mask, etc. And that's all we can do. And as far as vaccines are concerned, according to a friend of mine, lalabas daw ng mga $20 per dose yung vaccine na ginagawa ng Pfizer, at sana meron pang ibang gumawa ng vaccine para lalong dumami yung available. Pero according to my friend who used to be with Pfizer Philippines, Jerry Bacaro, he assumes he was the best boss of Pfizer in the region, and he was saying na mukhang as far as vaccines go, the Philippines, if at all, will get our share of the vaccines end of 2021 pa. So tingnan natin, and let's be hopeful on that. In any case, today we will have a different format. We are interviewing 3 individuals on a particular topic, which is geopolitical, international, maritime relations of the Philippines. Kasi po, on Monday, the President is going to give his State of the Nation address. Sabi nila, ano, pampito ba yun? I hope seven brings luck. But in any case, that doesn't seem to be the case with COVID-19. But on Monday, the President gives his SONA. So we thought it would be a good thing na imbis na puro na lang tayo COVID, puro local news, medyo i-elevate naman natin ang usapan, taasan natin ang content, pag-usapan natin yung mga mahirap intindihin na bagay. So we will be bringing in three individuals, three experts. Jay Batong Bakal, Director of UP Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Seas, para maintindihan natin yung nagiging sitwasyon natin dyan sa West Philippine Sea, yung iringan ng Amerika at ng Pilipinas. Jose Custodio, he's a defense analyst. Kaya ba nating depensahan or tayo ba'y aasa sa Amerika? Yun ba ang dahilan kung bakit nakipag-friendship na naman tayo regarding VFA? And Professor Renato De Castro, International Studies Professor at De La Salle University, para naman pag-usapan yung international relations. Kasi nung nag-meeting yung mga ASEAN nations, parang nasagap kong balita is at least four countries said, tatayuan namin yung China na yan. Hindi kami magpapaduro. And what are the repercussions of those statements? In any case, after that, we will also go to Governor Daniel Fernando of Bulacan. Medyo balik tayo dun sa ating COVID perspective. After interviewing the three gentlemen, we'll go to Governor Daniel Fernando ng Bulacan kasi malaman naman natin ano na ba nangyayari dyan sa probinsya ng Bulacan. In any case, let's go now to the headlines. Here are the here are the stories from the front page of the Philippine Star. The Justice Department reports that 476 inmates or persons deprived of liberty died in prison facilities handled by the Bureau of Corrections nationwide. This is equal to an average of 2 inmate deaths per day. Based on Bucor data, the inmates died of various illnesses, including COVID-19. Meanwhile, Senate Blue Ribbon Committee Chairman Dick Gordon called on Bucor Director General Gerald Bantag to take a leave of absence while the investigation carries on. But as far as Senator Franklin Drilon is concerned, the air of suspicion does not merit Bantag to stay in his post. Next, the Interior Department seeks clarification from Malacanang on the President's directive to arrest health protocol violators, most especially due to the problem of congestion in jail facilities nationwide. Interior Department spokesman Jonathan Malaya said that they need to clarify if the President was pertaining to arrest or apprehension, as the latter only merits sanctions or fines and not detention. Next Monday, President Duterte is set to deliver his 5th State of the Nation, hindi pala 7. Minamadali ko yung term ni Presidente. His 5th State of the Nation address or SONA. And in his speech, he is expected to unveil a pandemic recovery roadmap for the country. The economy has been reeling from lockdowns which were implemented to stem the spread of COVID-19. Economists have said that the pandemic has dragged the Philippines into a recession in the first half of the year. Retired Supreme Court Senior Associate Justice Antonio Carpio and former Ombudsman Conchita Carpio Morales have filed the 11th case against the Anti-Terrorism Act of 2020. They argue that the law should be declared unconstitutional because it gives the Anti-Terrorism Council, or ATC, powers greater than those of the President. Carpio and Morales have filed the petition electronically yesterday, and they are expected to physically file today when the Supreme Court resumes operation. So, time out lang ako, inom lang. So there you go. Those are the major stories in the headline, in the front page of the Philippine Star. So let's go to our guest for today. We have Jay Batong Bakal, Director of the University of the Philippines Institute for Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea. He is also an associate professor at the UP College of Law. We also have Jose Custodio, who is a defense analyst and military historian. He has served as a consultant for the Office of the National Security Advisor and the Office of the President. And last but not the least, Renato De Castro is an international studies professor at De La Salle University. He also writes a monthly opinion column for the Philippine Star and Business World. Gentlemen, magandang umaga sa inyo. Welcome sa agenda.
Good morning. Morning, Chito.
Morning, good morning.
Morning, Chito.
Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Pisto. Good morning, everyone.
Okay, I'd like to start off. This is how we'll do it. I'll throw a question and then we just take turns. I'll back out and I'll let you guys do the talking. Jay Batong Bakal, here's my first question. Regarding law of the sea, maritime relation, ang daming lumalabas sa storya eh. Babalik na yung Amerika sa West Philippine Sea, babalik na yung Amerika sa Subic, babalik na yung VFA. And some people are worried na, nako, baka mag-upa ka na. Baka magkabanata na dyan sa West Philippine Sea because of all of this. Jay, you start with your assessment of that situation.
Well, siguro naman, hindi naman sila talagang umalis sa West Philippine Sea, no? Because in the past few years, because of the defense relations between the two countries, continuous naman yung presence ng Americans there, no? And they have been able to access our ports and airports as well for things like supplies and as parang waypoints. No? So it's the same naman. The thing is, the intensity of Chinese actions is also na tinatapatan naman ng mga Americans. Now, yung possibility na magkaroon ng conflict or incident, of course, is there. But that's primarily because of the nakita man natin yung aggressive behavior ng China sa West Philippine Sea. Sila tong nanunutok, sila tong nangaharang ng mga barko at saka mga eroplano ng ibang bansa, no? So admittedly, in recent months, tensions have been higher, but for the most part, parang it's really not in the interest of either country to engage in an armed conflict right now, especially with the pandemic in the region. So, and their economic...
Why do you say that, Jay? Kasi parang baka naman wishful thinking lang natin yan na it is not in their economic or political interest eh. Kasi yung mainland China walang pakialam eh. Tuloy-tuloy ang paggawa ng isla, tuloy-tuloy ang they continue to harass people and make illegal declarations. And we are all assuming, oh, they know better. But do they really know better or they don't care? And gentlemen, pasok na lang kayo, no? But Jay, please respond.
Well, I don't think it's that they don't care, because China has its own plans. Then its promises to its own people to achieve a certain level of economic development in time for their 100th anniversary, no? So diskaril yun, no? Right now it's already been endangered by the pandemic. If they add on to it, talagang walang may reach dun sa targets nila, no? So they're also being careful, no? Admittedly, however, the possibility of an incident at sea na kumbaga small clash, that is still possible, no? Ang question is whether it can escalate into full-blown war, no? At saka the other problem is they've shown that they're willing to throw their weight around against the surrounding smaller countries. No? Doon mas malaking problema natin, kasi nga they've really shown that they don't care pagdating dun sa smaller countries, no?
Okay, defense analyst, Mr. Custodio, Joe Custodio.
Yeah.
May nadinig kasi ako or nabasa ko ba yon na four countries in the ASEAN with Vietnam at the lead and some other countries na sabi nila papalagan nila or they are going to stand their ground. What are the chances that these small nations can actually stand up to China? Kasi nagtataka ako, sa Vietnam, pinalulubog nila yung mga fishing boats ng China eh.
Well, because of the fact that in facing China, especially in the maritime domain, there are certain agencies that you can use without using the military. You do have your Coast Guard, no? Those types of agencies, they do not escalate the situation because it's usually it's a civilian agency, and that's why if you notice, many of them are aggressive against each other, but they're using um, Coast Guard or a maritime agency type of vessels. In that aspect, then they can afford to face off against the Chinese, who are also using the same type of agencies, and assert their rights in their respective areas. The problem in our case is that we don't do that. You know, our we don't even use the Coast Guard in that matter of protecting our fishermen. So usually our fishermen are left to their own devices. Okay, they go to the maritime, they go to the seas, and then there are the tender mercies of the Chinese. What usually they do, that there is, it's not that there's no Coast Guard presence there. It's what their orders usually are, which is basically monitoring. So we're monitoring the Chinese harass us to hell. So that's basically what's going on. So these countries, their militaries are in fact just as ill-equipped, not as good as what the Chinese have. But that doesn't stop them because they have, like I said, the Coast Guard and these other maritime agencies, what we call the white on white strategy. That's why they're not. Then, but I could go on and on, but I'll leave it at that first.
Yeah, okay, now let's go to Joe Custodio. Joe, no, to Professor De Castro. Rene ba o Ato? Oh, your microphone's on mute, Prof.
So,
Ayun, okay. Okay.
just call me Rene.
Okay, Rene, how does this play out? Because the Philippines recently reasserted, or at least yun ang pinalalabas nila Secretary Locsin, na they're reasserting the arbitral ruling of The Hague. Now, sabi ni China, wala akong pake. Basta kami, amin to. How does this play out? Because Joe Custodio is saying the government does not give out the order to defend and protect the sanctity of our domain, or at least to confront the Chinese vessels. So where are we in this?
Well, tingnan muna natin yung konteksto. No? The context, of course, since 2016, the Duterte administration adopted what I call a policy of appeasement, appeasing China, extending concessions. Like, what are the two concessions? Setting aside the arbitral ruling, and of course, during the time of President Aquino, we signed the enhanced defense cooperation with the United States. He also set this aside, that could have provided for rotational presence of American forces in 5 Philippine Air Force bases. But when President Duterte took over, he set this aside. So, but it has this appeasement policy has a quid pro quo. Number one is that we'll be getting Chinese investment through the Belt and Road Initiative, and number two, moderation in Chinese behavior. But the Chinese had failed to reciprocate the appeasement policy of President Duterte. No Chinese money entered the country in substantive terms. No, when President Duterte went to China in October 2016, when he came back, he said, "I'm bringing $24 billion. Only one project is currently being implemented, and that's in the Chico River Dam. That amounts to only 60 million. So where's the rest of those billions? Hindi pumasok. Three government cabinet members admitted Chinese money never entered the country. And of course, the second quid pro quo is, of course, moderation of Chinese behavior. It had never happened. So I
Mhm.
think the government at this point in time felt that, we were left hanging. We're a bunch of
Okay.
suckers, and which is the case. So this is basically what's causing this. The government is trying to basically more assertive now because it realized, no, yeah, it never got the return of that appeasement policy. But I
Okay.
also have to credit Secretary Locsin.
Uh-huh.
So he's making a difference. In contrast, of course, to his predecessor, who is really bent on selling us. In a way, that secretary acted as the second Chinese ambassador. I won't mention his name. I'm talking about the predecessor of Secretary Locsin. Secretary Locsin is really making it a point to assert claim. Second angle, no, regarding the ruling, a day after Secretary Locsin came out with a statement, a U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo came out with a statement regarding the change in U.S. policy vis-a-vis the South China Sea dispute. Now they're
Mm.
basing their policy on the arbitral ruling. So hindi na natin masasabi na yung arbitral ruling is just a piece of trash paper. Now
Okay.
you have U.S. diplomacy and naval power behind that ruling. Ang pinaka-essence nito, of course, is the arbitral ruling is that China's nine-dash line has no legal nor historic claim. That, of course,
Mm.
has been adopted by the United States. I leave it at that.
Okay. Jay, what's your reaction to that?
Yes, I agree naman, no? Kasi nga, by declaring openly that the United States is aligning its policies with the arbitral ruling when it comes to the South China Sea, they're putting the weight of their diplomacy and naval power, as Rene calls it, no? Behind the proper interpretation application of UNCLOS in the South China Sea. And this is very important because all of the smaller claimant countries, the Southeast Asian states, have aligned their policies and actions in accordance with the ruling. So it's really has the effect of essentially isolating China and its insistence on its claims.
Mm.
And we expect that other countries like the UK, Japan, etc., will follow suit because they've also been expressing or acting out similar policy positions in the past few years. No? Yung Pilipinas lang talaga yung medyo taliwas doon sa statements, pero at least 4 years later, no, better late than never. At least ngayon it's clear, no, that this ruling really has wide support, and it really is not a matter of concern only between the Philippines and China, but for the rest of the world also.
Okay, Joe, do you think, kasi sabi mo kanina white on white, meaning yung civilian kuno na forces ginagamit ng mga ibang bansa panglaban sa civilian kuno na mga vessels ng China. In effect, parang meron tayong proxy war. Hindi, mga bata lang yan, mga fishermen lang yan nag-aaway. At saka hindi, Coast Guard lang yan. So, hindi to military offensive, etc. But with the positioning of the United States, as Rene pointed out, we're now going back in history, guys. Parang, hindi ba, Joe, parang proxy war na naman to. We're too small, so we are calling in our big brother, the United States. Is that what's happening here?
Well, basically, the way I see it is that we have always been historically, especially with regard to the maritime issue, is that we have always been working from a perspective of regional partnerships and our alliances also. So we've never really departed from that. And even despite the fact that Duterte was saying so many things against the alliance in the past 4 years, there was never really a serious desire to break away from that. So even though he was saying that the VFA was suspended and what have you, talks between the two militaries were continuing. Why? Because we do realize the fact that China is actually formidable militarily. Okay, so
Hmm.
it's a so we And so in that aspect, much of our activities has always been in cooperation not only with the US but also with Japan and other countries, especially Japan. For example, in the matter of our Coast Guard, Japan has been one of the countries that have been uh, assisting the and I would say rapid upgrading of the Coast Guard. Okay, to the point that it can now. It used to be, I would call it a brown water Coast Guard before. Now it can project into the high seas, given the fact that it already has higher endurance and higher performance vessels, and considerably larger than what it used to have, and modernized. Okay, in fact, it's up until the arrival of the Jose Rizal, which is the frigate of the Philippine Navy from Korea. The Philippine Coast Guard actually had the most modern ships as compared to the Philippine Navy, had the more
Hmm.
modern ships. Okay,
Okay.
so and all of this is part and parcel of foreign assistance to us, because ever since the beginning of the mischief reef incident, the there was always and there was this there were these attempts, many derailed because of Asian financial crisis or whatever crisis internal that happened, war on terrorism. But there was always this attempt to build up the capabilities of the Philippines when it comes to facing China. And so right now, after these years of planning, preparations, budgeting, we now have this initial assets coming in already the past 7 years.
Okay, but
And all
what's
of
the
this, yes.
what's the suspension of the VFA relative to what Rene was saying? Rene was saying that we kind of entered into a agreement with China. Sige, yung arbitral ruling tatabi na lang muna namin. Basta bibigyan nyo kaming pera. Or was the VFA an affront to the United States or a condition of China? What say you?
Well, I would not. Wait, is that for me?
Yeah, for you.
Yeah, I would not speculate on what would be behind that, because we could go from all the way to the Batos visa, all the way to trying to send a signal to the US or trying to send a signal to China. But what I would look at it is the fact that despite those pronouncements, there were still activities on the ground or
Mm,
between headquarters, between commands of the US that and the Philippines that continued despite that. Okay,
okay.
they were still planning activities, and there was always the hope that this was just a transient phase, and it would, because again, what we have to always realize here is that the Duterte administration has a habit of walking back from its announcements, and that was also what was on the minds of people, that this is a phase, and they would walk back eventually from it. So talks and activities were still being planned.
Okay, Rene, I see you nodding in agreement several times with what the other two gentlemen have been saying. Please share your perspective kasi parang uh, maraming nagtatanong, ano ba ang halaga ng lahat nitong pinag-uusapan ninyo? What is the significance to an ordinary citizen? I guess to put everything in perspective, no? How has all of this, how has the Duterte's foreign diplomacy policy affected our stature, our economics, etc.? Sabi mo, na bola tayo, nagoyo
Ayun, oh, yun.
tayo.
Very obvious
Okay?
yun. Very obvious yun.
Oh, ano
We
pa?
consider, ang pinaka-context nito, no, I see it, two aspects. No. Number one, by adopting this policy of appeasement, he has basically put us in the middle of this ongoing strategic competition. We have to understand na yung South China Sea dispute, isa lang yan sa mga fronts na nangyayari ngayon. There's an ongoing global strategic competition between the United States and China, and by cutting a deal with China, he basically put us in the middle. So even the United States now see the Philippines as a fair game, because from the perspective of Washington, we are vacillating as an ally. And at the same time, this provided China an opportunity to basically see the Philippines as a target. That we would focus on this, we would change the view of the Filipinos, this government, so we can turn this. We can basically say to the United States, "Oh, we have gotten one of your allies." That's the global, no, the macro dimension. The other dimension here is societal. This administration has basically divided Philippine society between those who believe that it's important that we uphold values that are associated with the liberal democracies, rule of law, respect for human rights, respect for private properties, freedom of the press, freedom of expression. Then, of course, setting our standards in terms of the West, the United States, and the European Union. Pero ang policy, of course, is this administration is to say that China is a friend. We have to trust China. That, in a way, the authoritarian system is something that is suited for us. So there's two angles, no? Putting us in the middle of this geostrategic competition between the United States and China, and of course, dividing our society into two, in a way, polarizing our society. No?
Okay. Let's go for a quick break, gentlemen. Commercial lang tayo, hanap buhay. And when we come back, I'd like to get your ratings, your rankings of the Duterte administration in the fields of your expertise in terms of maritime law, in terms of defense, and in terms of international policy. Ano ang ginagawa nilang tama, ano yung mali, ano yung kulang, and ano yung kanila. Kasi lahat yata kayo, profesor, ano yung ibibigay ninyong grado sa kanila sa Lunes. We'll go for a quick break. We'll be right back here on Agenda. Okay, we're back on air, and sorry for that extended version of our background music, gentlemen. Just for those of you who are joining us late in the day, we are featuring three experts: Professor Jay Batong Bakal, Jose Custodio, and Renato De Castro. Jay is the UP Institute of Maritime Affairs and Law of the Sea expert. and teaches at law and UP Law. Joe Custodio is a defense analyst, and that is his area of expertise. And Rene De Castro is international studies at De La Salle University. Now, Jay, when we went into the break, I said I would like for all of you, each of you, to give your analysis, rating, ranking, and critique on the Duterte administration's policies and performance relative to your expertise. Start with you, Jay.
Well, probably no. In terms of international maritime law, no. Um, I'd have to distinguish, no. I'd say that nagkaroon ng phases yung performance ng administration, no. In the first couple of years, especially 2016 hanggang 2018, no. If I were to give it a grade, bokya. I mean, because they were coming out with really outrageous statements and positions in response to what was happening in the West Philippine Sea. Things that actually endangered the legal position and status of the Philippines when it came to its maritime entitlements. No, there was a change, a marked change. Tama rin si Rene, no? Give Luxin some credit then. There was a marked change starting April 4 last year. No, and why is that? It was the day that they issued a statement calling out China's maritime militia that was surrounding the Philippine outposts in Pag-asa Island and in other places in the Calayan Island group. And since that time as well, naging mas in a way mas controlled yung statements. It still went a bit off kilter for a couple of times, but at least there was a little bit more consistency and a little bit more thought going into the positioning, no? And bale for the year 2019, I would probably give it a siguro a passing mark na rin, 75, no? Because of that kind of transition. And then as of this past year naman, it hasn't ended yet, no? But we've seen some really stark changes in tone and content, no? So for that, probably I'll just give them a 79 or 80. No, I mean it still needs a lot of improvement, but at least it's more or less in the right direction. No, and it remains to be seen whether this now will be followed through. No, when it comes to how the administration will deal with what is sure to come, which is more incursions in the next few years. No? Yun.
How do you prevent that, Jay? How do you prevent the status quo out there in the sea? How do you prevent I guess, the perceived weakness of our position and statements? Kasi parang ang nagsasalita lang si Secretary Locsin at saka si Defense Secretary na parang sila lang yung matapang-tapang magsalita against China.
Well,
Does
I think
should the president speak out, or is that a bad suggestion because we could end up at the point of no return?
well, I don't know. I don't think Duterte will speak out because despite all these improvements nga, these are, as you said, secretary level pa lang eh. And given the kumbaga investment of President Duterte in the past few years always extolling China, o hanggang dito sa COVID-19, pinasasalamatan na niya ang China for selling us equipment at higher prices. I mean, I don't expect him to make that kind of statement. No, so the only way really is for the people to keep their voices, to keep ensuring that the government hears their voices. No, at the last SWS survey in the past few months, bagsak na naman ang public opinion about China. No, and we have to keep that kind of parang pressure, soft pressure up, no? I mean, public opinion does matter, and we've seen that basta may pumapalag na malakas, eh nagba-back off nga yung administration, no, sa mga statements and positions. I think the China policy is one of the biggest things that they've been sort of backtracking on, especially in recent years. Kasi nga tuloy-tuloy yung public negative public perceptions about China and what the government is doing with China. And it's only a few, some of the secretaries that have been parang nagiging outlet sila nung public frustrations na yon, or sila yung parang nakikita nating nagiging most responsive to that pressure from the public.
Okay, let's go to Joe. Joe, yung mga statements ni Defense Secretary, yung about China, the statements ni Foreign Affairs Secretary, uh, are these to be seen as, kasi hindi ba sa China, pag may nagsalita na high-ranking official, it is almost always a representation of what the leaders of that country believe and want to do. In the Philippines, yan ba single opinion of a cabinet secretary, or should we take it as a statement of government? Joe?
Sorry. I'm
Okay,
still
go.
muted.
No, you're okay.
Yeah.
Delay lang
One
pala.
Okay. Yeah, okay. One thing that I would say about the Duterte administration is that, in contrast to the other administrations, this one doesn't have how do I call it? A conductor. Okay. Duterte is not a conductor. He's not a bastonero, if I would use that term. It's like he allows everybody to just do their own thing. And in that matter, we see that, of course, in the COVID response, in the anti-COVID response, the COVID-19 response, wherein there's too many voices, too many suggestions, and those who are supposed to be on the forefront are not there. So that's typical Duterte, and that also is present in the issue of facing off China. Okay, that it's supposed to be done on a whole of government approach when you face China, but in this aspect, it seems that um, some of the um, some of the uh, officials in government say something else. Others, like Defense Secretary Lorenzana, and to some extent Loxin, they also say something else different. In short, what happens is that you have mixed signals, which then doesn't inspire confidence, because and confidence among the Filipino people. Okay, people get confused. What exactly are you up to? Okay, even Lorenzana himself, he will say one thing one day, and then the following day he will say something else. Okay, if you look at the pattern of his statements, so it confuses people. It doesn't inspire them. Okay, that is what we need. We need officials who inspire the people, because you're up against a country that is formidable. Okay, so you have to rally support. But exactly what Rene said a while ago is correct. This administration has managed to split a public opinion, whereas administrations prior to it were trying their best to solidify public opinion, to support policies that would constrain and contain China. This one sends mixed messages, and in fact even attacks those who are critical against China. So that then sends really, and it creates an atmosphere of defeatism. And if I will add to what Rene and Jay have been saying, is that we see that as one wonders then if this is an operationalization of what is known as China's unrestricted war strategy, the cooptation of politicians and weakening a society that is targeted by China in order to co-opt it eventually. So those are the things that we
Okay,
can think. But like I
time
said
out.
there,
Time
yeah.
out, Joe. Kasi very interesting yung sinabi mo na yan.
Oh.
Paki-explika mo nga in Tagalog sa mga ordinaryong mamamayan yung sinasabi mong strategy of co-opting political leaders, weakening. Kasi medyo malalim, pero palagay ko dapat maintindihan yan
Mm.
ng mga mamamayan.
Well, ang sa Tagalog kasi, yan yung pag-co-opt. Ano ba yung co-opt sa Tagalog? Sorry ano yung
Ginagamit mo, binabarkada mo, o
yung parang may binabarkada, o parang sinusuyo mo para mapasayo yung damdamin ng ng sektor na yon. Okay, no?
Okay.
Kala mo, romansa na yun, no? Pero yun
Oo.
ang point, no? Ang ginagawa dito is that kinukuha nila yung loob ng isang target sector, no? Para ang mangyayari nito, maging parang ahente nila, no? At kung ano yung bidding nila, ano yung policies nila, yan na ngayon ang tatao sa kanila sa bansang tinatarget nila. Napasailalim yan sa isang Chinese na strategiya na ang tawag doon ay unrestricted war na unang lumabas yan nung mga mid-1990s kasabay yan ng mischief reef incident, no? Yung mga 1990s nandun na hindi lang sa larangan ng tactical ang kilos ng mga Chinese ng mga Chino, pati rin sa larangan ng strategiya. So yun ang sinasabi, napakalaking kabad nito na ang nangyayari na sa atin. Kasi nakikita mo na humihina tayo, nagkakaroon tayo ng disunity. Meron mga pro-China na sinisira nila yung mga tao na anti-China or critical sa China. Hindi nga anti-China, critical nga lang sa China, sinisiraan na, sinasabi yan na ano kayo, mga war freak lang kayo, ginaganyan, dinidiscredit, no? So, yun ang sinasabi ko na parang sila na yung, kaya nga meron tayong sinasabi dito na parang nakakahalata ka na, parang ito na yung mismong spokesman ng yung mga spokesman ng China naging Pilipino na ang mga spokesman nila, no? So hindi na ang China nagdedepensa sa kanilang sarili. Pag nakikita natin sa ating bansa, ang dumedepensa na sa China, sariling kababayan na natin, no? Dala-dala ang isang aparato ng estado at ng tinatawag na propaganda troll makinarya.
Kumbaga, kunin mo yung tatay, sa'yo na yung pamilya.
Mismo.
Yun. Okay,
Ganon.
Rene, your take on the Duterte administration international policy kasi sa'yo yung pinakahuli siguro at pinakamabigat na analysis dahil pag pinapanood ko lahat yung mga international channels, bugbog sarado na tayo from Maria Ressa, COVID-19, EJK, the China thing, parang sabi ko, wala na yatang dati tayo yung darling ngayon tayo na yung binabakbakan. Rene, what's your assessment?
Mike.
Sabi ni Jose,
Mike.
no? You have to go back doon sa Chinese art of war nung panahon ni Sun Tzu, no? Way back the period of warring states. What China is doing to us is what you call to win without actually fighting. You know, bribing our government officials, dividing us, separating us from our allies and our friends. So, you know, the Philippines will be an easy picking. So that's basically my opinion regarding what to say and Jay had been saying. Now, in terms of the rating, no, I'll rate this in terms of two. Number one, foreign policy, and number two, defense. When it comes to foreign policy, I agree with Jay. No, probably in the 2 years before, from 2016 to 2018, I'll give the Philippines a failing mark because this was really a case of blatant appeasement. To the point, no? Sabi ko nga, lugi ang Pilipinas during that time. There were two Chinese ambassadors. One is, of course, in Makati. The other one is in the Department of Foreign Affairs. So all the statements were simply parroting Chinese position. Of course, there's been a dramatic change ever since Secretary Locsin took over.
Okay.
Sabi ni Jay, last year, I can also say around September last year, when Secretary Lorenzana raised the issue of Chinese warships passing through the Sibuyan Straits. That's the time when Secretary Lorenzana and Secretary Locsin came out with a diplomatic protest, and this pushed the Chinese back. So at this point, I'm giving our foreign policy a rating of B minus, passing. It's because of the redeeming actions that had happened since Secretary Locsin took over. In terms of defense, what I see is at least the modernization program that began during the previous administration, during the Aquino administration, as being implemented and funded by the Duterte administration. So the mention you said the acquisition of the frigates from South Korea, the acquisition of FA-50s, and continuing the modern, now we are going into the second horizon. I'll give the government A plus but not because it started the modernization program. It has implemented the modernization program and has decided to fund the modernization program. Pero ang question dito, is this directed against China? Let's give it a benefit of the doubt. So that's basically my rating for this administration. When it comes to
Okay.
foreign policy, B
Yeah.
minus. When it comes to defense, I could say it's A plus.
Okay, what should they improve on? Kasi, honestly, I think many of us also gave the president the benefit of the doubt at the beginning. Yung bang, o sige, kung naniniwala kang pwede nating barkadahin ng China, makikinabang tayo, o sige, dumating yung mga tourist, nangako ng maraming pera, pero sabi mo nga, mukhang nabokya tayo. What should the new direction or what should be the move of this administration in the next 2 years or so?
Are you addressing a question to me?
Yes.
Pangako ni President Duterte in 2016 when he set aside the ruling. No, in the future, I would bring it back. So that will be a challenge, not just announcing, no, saying, acknowledging, but putting his money where his mouth is. Number one, this is, of course, a challenge raised by former Secretary Albert De Rosario. Bring the ruling into the United Nations General Assembly. Also, CJ will be in a better position regarding this because his expertise is international law. In terms of our submission of our continental shelf, based on my understanding, Jay, you can correct me about this, we only submitted in 2009 our continental shelves in the Philippine Sea. But
Yes.
we have not yet submitted our submission in the West Philippine Sea. No, Malaysia has already done it in December 2019, and when Malaysia did it, Malaysia used the arbitral ruling. We don't have any territorial dispute with China because we don't recognize the 9-dash line. So there's no territorial dispute. So
Okay,
ayun yung challenge to his lasting legacy na pinangako niya actually noong 2016, Jay.
Okay, Jay, pakidagdagan mo yung sinasabi ni Rene.
Yeah, I agree. No, they have to put their money where their mouth is. No, and there are several concrete steps they can take to show na seryoso sila doon sa apparent new direction that they're taking, no, of really holding fast to the arbitral ruling. One is when it comes to petroleum exploration, they have to lift the moratorium on petroleum exploration on the West Philippine Sea. Kahit na nagkakaroon ng joint exploration and development negotiations, no, which to date have gone nowhere, no, the Philippines can show that it really is parang holding fast to the ruling by resuming, no, itong mga pending na exploration contracts in the West Philippine Sea. That's one signal. Tama rin si Rene, the submission of the claim to a continental shelf in the West Philippine Sea, no, that's been ready since 2009. Actually, I was one of those who I'm part of the team that actually drafted that thing, and it was only lacking the final editing, no. Pero yung naging decision was to hold off on it, no, because of the arbitration, the pending arbitration. But since that time, since 2016, we've repeatedly recommended na at the very least, we should file what they call a preliminary submission or preliminary information to show na talagang seryoso tayo. But hindi pa rin ginagawa, no? The most that they've been able to do was to say, parang incidentally, when they submitted a note verbal with respect to the Malaysian claim, they said na, well, we will be filing a claim in the future to this area also, no? But it has to be followed up, no? And that will show na talagang seryoso tayo that we are asserting our legal rights and entitlements to that area, no? And then when it comes to the itong mga nangyayari nga sa West Philippine Sea, no, I think a little bit more transparency on what's really going on is in order, no? Kasi if you'll notice, kumbaga bumagsak yung transparency on developments in the West Philippine Sea under the administration, parang nasusuppress yung balita tungkol sa mga nangyayari, and we find out about them only about months later, no? So like the the incident concerning the Conrado Yap when China pointed its weapons at it. No, that came out 2 months or 2 or 3 months after the incident. No? And
Mm.
then recently, in the Philippine News Agency revealed that there was actually another incursion of Chinese marine scientific vessel in the West Philippines that took place last April or May pa, April and May. And it was already June. Oh, no, sorry, it was already the middle of July when this came out, and it wasn't even parang really given the attention that it should have gotten. Kasi according to the report, they conducted a survey. Um, these are things that should show that we really are yung parang talaga pinanindigan natin yung kalapatan natin diyan sa dagat, no? And then we should
Okay.
continue na yung parang yung track na nitong defense cooperation, security cooperation, which we've been receiving from several countries, not just the US, but also Japan, Australia, and even the EU, and soon we'll probably be getting offers from others. No, we should really should pursue those. No, and beef up. No, the presence of or beef up deterrence in the West Philippine Sea. No, I mean deterrence to deter China from instigating another change in the facts on the ground. No, that will be really provocative.
What about guys? What about yung suggestion, and maybe Jose can comment on this? Di ba may suggestion na taw- tawagan nyo na si Kuya or call in Big Brother, the United States to help us get rid of all of these white forces in the West Philippine Sea. But in connection with that, I also want to ask you guys for my last question. Uh, Kasi si presidente noon sinabi niya, "Huwag niyong kukulitin, aarestuhin yung mga Chinese na pumapasok sa Pilipinas." And after that, wala na. Binaha na tayo ng mainland Chinese. And then nagkakaso yung Coast Guard natin doon sa shooting incident with a Taiwan fishing vessel. And I'm saying to myself, baka naman dahil sa statement ni Pangulo at dahil doon sa isolated case na yon, parang sinasabi na ng mga law enforcer, bahala na kayo dyan, ginagawa namin yung trabaho namin, nakakulong kami. I'll start with you, Jose.
Well, calling Kuya, well, there's a problem there. How will Kuya look at us if, for example, si Bunchoy is not doing its job in really defending its territory? Okay, before we call in Kuya, then we must also be resolute in defending our own fishermen. No, hindi pwede yung, wala tayong magagawa dyan. Hindi pwede yung ganon. So, we must have the moral high ground also in at least showing the willingness to defend our own territory. Hindi pwede
Very good,
yung
very good.
we will make the we will make the last American or the last Vietnamese die for our maritime interests, no? Because
Okay.
that's actually a sentiment of our partners when they look at us, no? I have attended a number of similar exercises, war game exercises and such, and sometimes you have rank and file counterparts looking at us with that and asking us that question, what's really your policy? Okay, do you want us to die for you? Going like that, you know.
Mm.
And now especially now that we have COVID-19, it raises a danger that we will even be more, we might become noisy diplomatically, yes, statement wise, but very, very meek on the ground. Okay, why? Because the pandemic response is really gutting into the defense budget. There are a number of items that in the horizon 2 that are already being postponed and delayed precisely because funds have been realigned
Mhm.
to pandemic response. And that being
Mhm.
said, it might encourage more meekness. And if that is the attitude, then it sort of creates an obstacle for dynamic multilateral responses and even bilateral responses to China's activities, aggressive activities in our maritime interests.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jay, what about yung point nga? Kasi bakit magpapakamatay o magpapakabayani yung Coast Guard pag nagkamali, kulong? How do we correct that?
Um, well, we should try to avoid the mistakes of the past, no? I mean,
Mm.
tama ka, yung nabanggit mo dun sa Coast Guard, for example, no? I mean, the incident in Balintang, no, with Taiwan. I mean, we threw the Coast Guard under the bus, no? And the government didn't even try very well to at least protect its own, no?
Mm.
Tapos dito, that almost happened again dito naman sa nung nagkaroon ng incident sa Bolinao with respect to the Vietnamese fishermen who were shot by the Navy, no? So
Mm.
yung ganong klaseng incidents have to be handled properly. I mean, if we want these guys to really protect our resources and our people at sea, then we should also protect them in case they do get into trouble, and which is part of their job talaga. No, when they try to do their when they try to carry out their missions, no. No, and then pagdating dito sa sa diplomacy natin, tama rin si Jose. Parang maingay tayo ngayon. Kaya nga sabi ko kanina, let's see if this will actually be followed up by real action, no? On the ground, the significant steps nga, really important steps to show na talagang pinaninindigan natin yung pinagsasabi natin.
Okay. Rene, last piece from you. Yung I don't know how to term it, but the president has that style. Wag niyong gagalawin or arestuhin niyo lahat, etc. He makes sweeping statements. I don't know if he realizes that when he makes those statements, it almost becomes law and the law enforcers abide by it. And I'm referring in particular yung do sa mga Chinese. Wag niyong gagalawin. Should the president review and change those statements?
About assistance our ally, the United States. No, how do you
Yeah.
expect the United States to honor its alliance commitment to us when we have no less than the president sometimes and even his spokesperson saying, if push comes to shove in the South China Sea dispute between China and the United States, we will remain neutral. No, we cannot be neutral because we have an alliance with the United States. The president also said this, in one of his earlier speeches. The militarization of those islands in the South China Sea are no concern to us because anyway they're directed against the United States and Japan. Again, it's our concern to us because it's our allies that are being threatened by the Chinese. So how can you expect our ally to come with our assistance? We're bent on selling our allies for China for the sake of 30 pieces of silver. So that's my point regarding this. Second naman, regarding the Coast Guard, the former, he used to be the DCM of the Japanese embassy in Manila. Now he's back in Tokyo. I can tell what he told me. They're having an issue with our Philippine Coast Guard because if you remember, the Japanese government provided us 12 Coast Guard vessels, and they're complaining that they're rotting in the ports because what the president said, it's not just statements; they're actually reflected in policies. Those newly acquired Coast Guard vessels from Japan are instructed to stay in the ports, or sometimes they're deployed in the Philippine Sea, but not in the West Philippine Sea. So it boils down again to this appeasement policy of this administration. Let's be overly sensitive to Chinese interests. So again,
Okay.
that's the point. How can we challenge China if basically the government is bent on really trying to be very sensitive, to be very accommodating to Chinese diplomatic and strategic interests? This is the
Okay.
very essence of appeasement.
Well, I'm sure that those who joined us this morning had a mouthful, an earful, and a head full of knowledge in political science, law of the seas, public relations, and regional politics. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. It's been very educational, very informative, and We hope that the president and his cabinet would take notice of your inputs and consider them positively and not consider them as criticisms. Thank you, gentlemen. Take care of yourselves. God bless.
Yep. Thank you, then.
Thank you. Bye
Okay.
bye.
Okay, those were our guests, ladies and gentlemen. Jay Batong Bakal of the UP Institute of Maritime Affairs, Jose Custodio, Defense Analyst, and Renato De Castro, Professor of International Studies at the De La Salle University. And ayun po, no, medyo, it's sad, but that's their analysis of the government's international policies, the government's performance in terms of asserting our rights in the international arena, and also what we are sorely lacking. So kung ang bayan hati, walang mangyayari. Kung ang Pangulo ay mas pinapanigan ng China, walang susunod, walang lalabag na mga law enforcers. At ayun po, meron pala tayong 100 sasakyan pangdagat doon sa pier. Ayun, nabubulok na lang daw mismo ng embahada ng Japan na wala na dito, nandoon na sa Tokyo. Ang nagsabing, may problema kami sa inyo, binigyan namin kayo ng mga mga sasakyang pangdagat para mag-asikaso ng inyong teritoryo, binubulok naman pala ninyo. We'll go for a quick break, and when we return, we will go to our regular routine of checking on the provinces, cities, mayors, governors, kung ano na nangyayari as far as COVID-19 and local economies are concerned here on Agenda. You're back on Agenda. I'm Sito Beltran, and you are watching us via Signal TV channels 8 and 250, as well as One News PH on Facebook and on YouTube. And at this point, atin naman pong kamustahin. Let's check on the Governor of Bulacan Province, Governor Daniel Fernando. Good morning, Governor. Okay.
Hello?
Hello, Governor. Magandang umaga sa inyo.
Yes, Sir Chito. Magandang umaga po. Magandang
Okay.
umaga sa inyo mga taga-pili. Kaya magandang umaga din.
Okay, timing na timing yung pagtawag namin sa inyo kasi mukhang may mga bali-balita dyan o hindi pagkakaintindihan na total lockdown dyan sa Bulacan. Pakiliwanag lang daw po ito, Governor. Ano ba talaga yung gagawin?
Yun nga po, may nagpakawala ng balita. I think, kung hindi po ako nagkakamali, may nagsabi sa akin sa Facebook daw. May nagsabi na nagpakalat na mag-lockdown doon. Bulacan, kaya yung tao ay nagpapanik sa dito. Yung hindi maganda eh. Actually, dapat hindi tayo nagkakaganito eh. Wala dapat na nagpapakawala ng mga false alarm na to, false news to, yung mga news na hindi naman dapat ikalat sa tao. Kasi ang tao, alam nyo, dito, natatakot sila sa COVID eh. Pagkaroon lang ng isang COVID na kaso sa barangay, isa, dalawa, takot na yung buong barangay. Maglagay lang ng quarantine facility sa isang barangay, natatakot na yung buong barangay. Hindi ko nga maintindihan dito, Chito. Bakit ba sila natatakot dito sa COVID? Ito, nagpakawala daw ng lockdown. Hindi kami na yung lockdown. And actually, I appealed sa IATF National at tayo kinatigan sa MGCQ. At nung bago mag-July 1, inappeal ko na mag-stay kami sa GCQ. Now, hindi kami na napagbigyan for retain for GCQ. But instead, binigyan kami ng maluwag, which is the MGCQ. So, okay, ginawa namin yung design for MGCQ. Lahat nagbalik na ng trabaho. Yung sakop ng percentage na MGCQ nakabalik na ng trabaho. Yung sakop ng MGCQ na percentage na magbabalik negosyo o mga balik pagtitinda, yun na, nagbalik ka na. But ito nga, so baka magbalik kami sa GCQ itong July 15. So I appealed again. Baka ma-retain na lang kami kami sa MGCQ. So pinigbigyan naman tayo. But subject to, yun, hiniling ko na lang na kami na lang yung mag-zoning lockdown. Ganon, kung meron man na kaso. But ito nga, Sir Tito, ang malungkot dito, itong mga tao na to, na pinapaligan, hindi ko maintindihan kung ano ba to. Ginugulo ba nila ang tao, inano man tao? No, wala pong lockdown sa Bulacan. Zoning lang ang gagawin namin. Actually, nag-Zoom meeting na ako sa mga mayors. At ganun din sa ating IATF provincial meeting na kami, summarize the attendance. Yun na lang mahalagang dapat nating kausapin. And then yun, may mga design na akong naba, may mga design na kami, and isa dito ay ang pagpupromote ko ng no fear. Chito? No fear.
Yes, sir.
Do not
No
fear
fear.
the COVID. Kasi alam mo, Chito, nangyayari na ngayon, may mga psychological na ngayon effect na eh. May sa psychological war na nangyayari sa atin eh. Hindi ko maintindihan dito, Chito, kung ano ba itong COVID na to, saan galing, mga asymptomatic, may ganito. Hindi naman lalabas yung iba, nagkakaroon. So, ang pakiusap ko lang, Chito, itong mga walang magawang kababayan ko, o kung sino man yung walang magawa dito, kung taga Bulacan man, o taga ibang labas, na talagang sumisira o naninira ng diskarte ng aking lalawigan na ating mga ginagawa, huwag naman nilang guluhin. Yun naman ang pakiusap ko. Wala silang magawa. Manalangin na lang sila. Mag-pray na lang sila. Baka mas sakaling mag-bless pa sila. Chito, I want to clear and clarify. There is no lockdown in Bulacan. Actually, zoning lockdown lang ang gagawin namin. If ever, yun ang gagawin namin. Kasi yun ang nakalagay naman sa binigay sa ating appeal dito sa IATF National. So, yun lang Chito. And actually, we have cases ngayon, active cases na 613. And then yung ating recovered is 308. At ang ating death rate ay 47. Yun, mababa talaga yung death rate natin. Kaya pinagsusumikapan natin. Of course, kami yung pinakamalapit sa Metro Manila. Labas-pasok kami dyan. Nakikita mo naman ang kaso sa dito sa NCR, di ba? Talaga namang natatagdagan. Yung ating mga kababayan ay marami rin yung nagtatrabaho sa NCR. So may mga umuwi. Yun, binabantayan din namin yun. At may design na kami dyan. Ang gagawin natin, yung kinuusap natin ang ating PSWDO, yun, ang ating PHO na may design kami na magagawa kami ng form to identify the workers in NCR sa bawat household. Magpapakawala na ako ng mga form. Inaalamin ko saan ka nagtatrabaho, saan ka nakatira, nag-uwian ka ba. Yun na, ikakalat yun ng ating mga volunteer workers sa mga bawat household at kukunin namin ilan na nakatira, sino-sino mga nagtatrabaho sa Bulacan, sino nagtatrabaho sa Manila. Yun, aalamin namin kung sino-sino para malaman namin kung ito ba umuwi o hindi, para mabantayan namin. Kasi Sir Chito, mahirap sa checkpoint. Ano? Sa checkpoint, napakahirap kung sino yung aalamin mo kung sino ba to, ito ba ano ba, o nagtatrabaho ba to. Matagal, makakakos of traffic. So ngayon, ito na yung technique. So papakawalan ko na yung mga form sa bahay. Aalamin ko na kung sino-sino yan. Para yun, mabantayan namin yung mga yan. Di ba? Makita namin ngayon.
Governor, Governor, maganda yung ginabalak nyo, preemptive and preemptive. Pero kasi nga, mukhang nabibiktima nga kayo ng fake news kasi ang nasagap naming balita, libo na yung may COVID cases dyan. Sinasabi mo, 613 lang.
Mali po lahat ang pinakakawalan ng mga fake news na yan. Yun ang mga taong walang magawa at sinisira yung diskarte ng ating mga IATF members and mga medical frontliners, natin.
So paano
yung mga walang magawa?
Okay, paano po yung gagawin natin? So magpapa-survey kayo para at least alam nyo lang kung nasaan o sino yung mga labas-pasok at nagtatrabaho sa NCR. Ngayon, paano na kung may pagdududa o may cause of concern? Meron na ba kayong sufisyente? Do you have ample test kits? Balita ko, meron ka raw 11 million pesos na Bulacan Molecular Diagnostic Laboratory. May laboratory kayo, meron ba kayong sufisyenteng mga test kits? Kasi mukhang yan ang nagiging issue dyan sa mga laboratory na yan.
Boss, meron kaming gene expert. Kakabukas lang, buminok sa amin 3 weeks ago. Gene expert machine. At ito, meron po tayong molecular laboratories sa ating lalawigan ng Bulacan. Meron po tayong lagpas 10,000 o 11,000 testing kit. At ito po, inintay lang natin yung ating mga isa pang kinukumpay namin ay yung training ng ating mga medical frontliners na gagawa diyan sa molecular. Yung po yun. We have sufficient. Meron po tayong sufficient test kit na doon sa mga gustong magpa-test o magpa-swab. Meron po, nakahanda po kami dyan. Once it open, ito po, to those who want na magpa-test sa ating molecular, ayan po, sige, ready po tayo. And yung pong pinagsumikapan po ng ating mga LGUs, at sinuportahan din naman natin yung Johnny Villanueva Molecular Laboratory. Yun, tulong-tulong po kami. Yung po yun, pinagsumikapan ng ating mga mayor. So, yung po yung isa sa mga tulong natin, bukod pa po sa Bulacan Molecular, at meron po tayong BICC, the Bulacan Bulacan Infection Control Center. Yung po yun, binuksan po natin noong May 3. It's actually, kahapon, meron po kaming kaso na isa dyan sa Giginto, sa aking barangay, na pinadala ko sa ICC, dahil galing ng Makati, ayun po, at umuwi doon sa atin, yun, nagkaroon siya ng sintomas. Ayun po yan. So, pinadala na natin doon sa PICC.
Okay.
Yung
Paano?
at meron po tayong provincial quarantine facility at meron po tayong para sa OFW, doon po sa DSU na kinikater po doon, mga asymptomatic din. dito sa ating provincial quarantine, asymptomatic din. At ito po, meron tayong ginawang MOA sa between the UNTV with Kuya Daniel Razon, doon po sa kahabaan ng MacArthur Highway, yung kanilang quarantine facility sa NAB building. So yan po, nakahanda po tayo at pinalalakas po natin ngayon at nagbigay na po ako ng mga ng ating direktiba na no home quarantine hanggat maaari at ito ilagay na sa mga municipal quarantine facility. At yung ating mga mayors, sinabi ko rin na palakasin ang municipal quarantine facility. Kung maaari, dagdagan nyo. Ayan po, lalo po yung San Jose del Monte, nakapag-meeting na po tayo sa mayor doon, sa CHO, sa DILG, sa PNP, na magkaroon talaga ng off-plan sita. Ayan po, so yan po yan sa ating mga direktibang binigay sa ating Philippine National Police, sa ating provincial director ng ating PNP na ibaba sa bawat hepe, sa bawat kapulisan ang off-plan sita. Yan po yung mga walang face mask, yung mga lumalabag sa omnibus guidelines ay bigyan ng paalala kung matigas ang ulo, hulihin. Actually, sa Chito, yung sa San Jose del Monte, sinabi nila na puno na raw yung kanilang kulungan sa mga matitigas ang ulo.
Yun na nga po.
Puno
Yun
na
na.
talaga. At yung iba nating kulungan, puno na rin talaga actually. Marami po talagang matitigas ang ulo. Sa totoo lang. Sa Chito. Well,
Okay.
yung pong sinabi nyo kanina, wala ba sa news, hindi po totoo yun. Actually, we have
Governor.
Ano po? Yung
Yeah,
po yun.
Governor, makasingit lang po, Gob, no? Kasi kailangan ko lang maintindihan. Kasi sabi ninyo, punuan na yung mga kulungan sa San Jose del Monte, punuan na sa mga ibang kulungan sa mga pasaway. Yan po bang mga nahuhuli na yan ay mga talagang pasaway lang o mga taong nakikipagsapalaran na kasi kailangan nilang magtrabaho, nakakalimutan nila yung face mask o kakulangan lang ba ng training? Kasi yun ang miyat-miya sinasabi ko, inuulit ko na please lang, wag po nating unahin yung pananakot at parusa, unahin natin yung pangangaral at pagte-training. Ano po ba yung dahilan ng mga nakukulong na yan?
Yes. Sa Chito, yan po yung mga ibang kaso na nagtutupada. Okay?
Aray ko.
Mga lasing. Ano po, nagiinuman na tas walang face mask, nagiinuman. Yan po yan. At dumalakad na lasing. Hindi lang po yung sa face mask yan, kaya Chito. Hindi lang po yan nakikipagtapalaran. Yung mga nakikipagtapalaran, sabi ko sa ating PNP, bigyan ng pagkakataon o i-orient na mag-face mask, bigyan ng konsiderasyon. Pero talaga, boss sa dito, yung mga lumalabag talaga, yung bawal pa yung sabong, di ba? Bawal pa yung inom-inom, di ba? Tapos yung
basketball.
Malapad na ganong edad, di po ba? Ay nasa guidelines po yan. Hindi lang po yung sa face mask. Sa Chito, iba't ibang klaseng kaso po yan. Sa Chito.
Mabuti nalinaw nyo.
Yes, boss, can give consideration. Wala namang problema doon. Pwede natin pangaralan, sinabi ni Benji, pangaralan nyo, pagsabihan ninyo. Kaya mga po, meron po tayong off-plan sita. Yun po yung off-plan sita natin. Siyempre, may kung talagang, kung pwede naman pagbibigyan natin. Pero, sir, kung mga talagang illegal naman at kamukha ng mga lasing, lalakad sa kali, walang face mask, nakahubad, di ba? Sir, dapat to bigyan na natin ng ano yan. Yun ng medyo bigyan natin ng tinatawag na hindi naman mabigat na parusa, yung aral, di ba?
Hindi ba marami kayong mga piggery dyan sa Bulacan? Ba't hindi nyo paglinisin ng mga babuyan dyan para magtanda?
Ano, dito?
Paglinisin nyo ng mga babuyan at saka ng mga kanal para magtanda.
Yung ating babuyan, mga babuyan natin hindi pa active ngayon kasi hindi pa nga pinapayagan ng ating DA yung magbaboy ngayon sa ngayon. Yung pagkakaalam ko kasi yung mga kasing sa SAF, medyo active pa yon, di ba? Medyo,
Okay.
kung wala sa Bulacan, hindi tapos na ano, pero hindi pa pinapayagan, nalilipas pa yon. Kasi, di ba, may mga virus na kumalat yung SAF na pinapatay yung mga baboy natin. So, hindi pa babalik ng gusto. Kaya ang ginawa ng ating Department of Agriculture, sumuporta sa pamamagitan ng ibang paghahayo, like yung mga manok, pagpapamanukan, at yung pong manibigay ng mga kambing, nagbigay po ng mga bakat kalabaw. Ayan po yan, doon sa mga natisima ng SAF. Yan po yan, katulong natin ng Department of Agriculture. Okay, ito namang ating Provincial Agriculture, pinadaan po yung mga hayop sa ating veterinary office, sa ating POB, yung Provincial PBO, yung ating Provincial Veterinary Office, Veterinary Office. Ito naman pong sa Provincial Agri natin, sa Chito, ito naman doon sa mga magsasaka natin na nagtatanim ng gulay, namimigay po kami ng mga buto.
So, okay naman ho yung economy nyo. Mayor, paubos na kasi oras natin. Last question ko na lang. Okay naman ang ekonomiya ninyo dyan?
Yes, sir. Although, siyempre, may mga nagle-lay off ng trabaho dahil ngayon pa lang nagre-recover. Di po ba? But meron kaming ginawang recovery program ang ating provincial government. Pinag-submit ko ang ating mga department heads ng recovery program at inaayos namin yung ating recovery program. But awa ng Diyos, may nakakabalik na po sa trabaho, may nakabalik na po sa pagninegosyo. Yun po, yung ating mga uupat sa ating mga stall, ayun po, minitingnan namin sa araw at humihingi sila ng consideration. And sabi ko sa ating PA's office, sabi ko kay Kuya Boy, bigyan natin ng consideration, tingnan nyo, pinasa ko sa kanila. Pero huwag natin gipitin, huwag tayo magbigay natin yung cleanliness, ibigay natin yung kanilang direktiba natin regarding according to guidelines ng Omnibus. At kinakailangan yung kanilang consideration hihingi tungkol sa upa, tungkol sa hinihingi nilang consideration na natawad sa mga nagdaang panahon na nag-lockdown na kung kunang bayaran, bigay natin ng consideration. Wala namang problema dyan.
Okay, maraming salamat, Governor. At kinapos na tayo ng oras, pero mabuti naman na naliwanagan nyo na hindi totoo yung total lockdown, na ang inyong mga kaso ay 613 lang, at kayo ay patuloy sa MGCQ. Maraming salamat, Governor Daniel Fernando, sa inyong oras ngayong araw na ito.
Sir Chito, maraming salamat po. At yun po, ulitin ko, hindi po totoo yan, tigilan ng chismis. Manalangin tayo, dagdagan ng panalangin instead na mag-chismis. Maraming salamat, Sir Chito. Mabuhay pa at mabuhay ang programa mo. Thank you po.
Thank you very much. Yan po si Governor Daniel Fernando of the province of Bulacan, and it's good that we connected with him this morning because there is no truth to the rumors that they are going to do a total lockdown. Hindi raw po totoo yun. Maggagawa sila ng zoning, specific areas, targeted areas. Hindi rin po totoo yung balitang 1,000 plus cases na yung COVID, 600 daw po at naka 300 something na ang recovered. So namamanage nila, meron na silang molecular laboratory sa Bulacan. So it's all good news, and we hope we continue here. And as the good governor pointed out, magdasal po tayo, manalangin tayo. I will not stop saying that, repeating that, because faced with the fact that we have no medicine, we have no vaccine, the most powerful solution we have are prayers, and praying for our others, for our nation, for our leaders, for all the patients who are COVID infected. And I hope you do likewise. Maraming salamat po for joining us this morning, and we will continue to do the program, God willing. Thank God, and bless all of you.